and welcome to English is Beautiful. I'm Kirsty, and in this series of videos we're going to look at B1 listening. If you find listening complicated or scary, like lots of my students, then these videos will help you to feel more confident, to learn useful tricks and tips to make listening easier, and will give you lots of practice so that you feel good about listening to English in any situation, and particularly in a Cambridge PET B1 exam. Even if you're not doing the exam, this video will help you to get better at listening too. Okay, so let's go. This class will focus on the structure of the B1 PET exam, but there are some useful general tips too about listening. The Cambridge English PET B1 exam lasts for about 30 minutes, and then after the exam you have an extra 6 minutes to copy your answers onto the separate answer sheet, the piece of paper with your answers. This is the paper that you give to the examiner, and it's the paper that gets corrected. There are 4 parts in the listening exam. Each part is a bit different, with different techniques, and tests different listening skills. The most important thing is to not panic. You probably will not understand every word, but you need to be happy with uncertainty, happy to not understand everything, and just listen for the information that is necessary to choose the correct answer. Okay? In this video we're going to look at each of the 4 parts of the exam. Okay? Each question is worth 1 mark, so in total there are 25 possible marks. This is an example of part 1 of the Cambridge PET B1 exam. You have 7 questions that look like this, and each question is worth 1 mark, as I said before. You have a question and 3 pictures. Each picture is an option. Okay? Focus carefully on what the question is asking you. You will hear a conversation, and in the conversation they will probably talk about all 3 options, but only one option is the answer. Only one option is correct. So you need to read the question to see, for example, maybe the question is asking about the past, like in number 1. What did the girl buy on her shopping trip? It's in the past. In their conversation, maybe they talk about one option in the past, one option in the present, and one option in the future. And only if you read the question carefully will you be able to choose the correct answer about the past. It's also important to listen to the complete conversation before you choose, because sometimes it seems like one answer is correct, but later in the conversation the people change their mind, and they contradict what they said initially, what they said before, and it's a different answer that's correct. So it's very important to listen to the entire conversation and then choose. You hear the audio twice, so you can listen to the whole conversation, choose an answer, then listen again to check. Sometimes you can discard one of the options. You can eliminate that option, and this helps you because then you only have 2 possibilities and a 50% chance of getting the correct answer. There are no negative marks in this exam, so even if you have no idea, choose one and there's some possibility that you will get it correct. Going on to part 2. Part 2 looks like this. There are 6 questions, and for each question you hear a different conversation, and there are 3 possible options. Again, you hear each conversation twice, and be very careful because the people will talk about all 3 options. Read the question carefully before you listen and try to predict similar words or phrases or synonyms that you expect to hear. If the people use one of the option words, one of the words in the options in their conversation, it probably is not that option. That's just Cambridge trying to trick you. If it seems too obvious, it possibly won't be that option. So be very careful. For example, in number 8 here, letter A, if you hear the word helpful, the answer is probably not A. And the same is true in all parts of the exam, really, in all parts of the listening exam. Going on to part 3, and I remind you that in my later videos, we will do these exams slowly to see how the answers are hidden. Now, part 3 is a bit different. This time, they give you a text. You have some time to read the text before you hear the audio. When you read it, try to predict the information that is missing, because when you listen, you won't hear exactly the same words as the words written before and after the space. So you need to be ready to listen for the specific information that's missing. Sometimes it's a number, sometimes it's a name or a place or even a website, and they spell the word, so A, B, C, D. You have to listen carefully and write the letters. Sometimes it's a date or a day, and by predicting before you listen, it helps you to identify. Again, and you'll hear this when we practice together in another video, often it seems like there's more than one option. So be careful which one you choose. And the second time you hear the conversation, check. If you have no idea, try to put something in the space. this part of the exam is probably the most difficult to guess if you don't hear the answer. But you can try. There are no negative marks. This part of the exam, I think, is really useful for real life because we often are listening for specific information, like what time does the train leave, or what's the address that I have to go to, what's the place, what's the name of the person. So it's very useful to train this type of listening skill for specific information. Going on to part 4, and by this point in the exam you might be tired. It's hard to concentrate for 30 minutes listening in English. This is why it's so important to practice. In part 4 you hear another long audio, well, relatively long, and usually it's a radio interview with somebody about their job, about their work. So for example, in here we have an interview with a champion swimmer who's now a swimming coach. In this part of the listening, there are 6 different questions, and every time the interviewer, the person asking the questions, every time they ask a new question, it's an indication that you should move on to the next of your questions. Okay, so if you hear a new question, probably move on to the next one of your questions. Again, you have time to read the questions carefully before you hear the audio. So predict what you might hear, underline keywords, try to think of possible connected synonyms or related phrases that might indicate this answer. We'll practice this together, and I'll help you see where they hide the answer to each one. But as with parts 1 and 2, if you hear the exact word in the question, in the possible answer, it probably isn't that answer. But anyway, we'll see that in a later video. Okay, so looking at some of the tips we've talked about, in general, in the listening, or when you're listening in real life too, well, you won't have a question maybe, but read the question carefully and underline keywords. Try to predict synonyms or similar related phrases and listen for those. If you hear exact words, it's probably not the answer. Try to discard or eliminate incorrect answers to help you choose, to narrow down the range of possible answers. And then decide after listening to all of the audio, because sometimes the answer's at the beginning of the conversation, sometimes it's in the middle, sometimes it's at the end. And the second time you hear, you can check your answers. And as an overall thing, as an overall tip, I'm sure you've heard this before, but practice each part as much as possible. The more you listen to English, the clearer you will be able to distinguish between words, and the more vocabulary and grammar structures you will be exposed to. Try to study the grammar and vocabulary for B1 as well. If you feel confident about the structures, then it will help you to feel confident when you listen to them. And if you practice the pronunciation of the structures, both slowly and fast with a native speaker or somebody with a very high level of English, you will be able to hear the sounds much more clearly. Because when we speak English, we connect the words, we don't pronounce very clearly, probably, and it makes it more difficult for people who are learning. You need to get used to that. You need to accustom your ear to hearing how we actually say these long structures that look clear when on paper, when they're written, and sound really quite different. If you can pronounce them, you can hear them. It really, really helps. You can listen to my videos and try to shadow, try to repeat just after, or stop the video and repeat, and try to pronounce the words and the phrases exactly how I do, and that will help you to train your ear as well as your speaking. Then also in a later video we will look at the different listening skills, because it's quite different trying to hear the general opinion that somebody has to picking out specific information to answer a question we have. They're very different skills, and you need to practice them independently. It's a bit like you're training for a sport. Maybe you train your skills with a racket or a ball, and then you separately you train your running or jumping. So the same is true with languages. It's useful to separate the skills. Okay, so in the next video we'll look at the first part of the exam and practice that together slowly. Okay, so you feel confident. So thank you very much for watching. I hope the video has been useful. Please write in the comments if you have any questions or doubts, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Okay, so bye bye.